Welcome to facewest, another of our mini cooker stove system reviews. We've got the latest crop of 1 and 2 man stove systems, the kind of one where the pot locks onto the top of the burner. We've got the Jetboil Minimo, the MSR Windboil and the Primus Lite. So in each of them we've got half a litre of tap water, all at the same temperature, all with brand new gas canisters on the bottom. So we are going to just have a little burn test and see how we get on. Okay, so that's got them all up and running. What you will notice with the MSR is that it has no piezo igniter, so you still have to use a lighter to get it going, and you do need a lighter rather than a sparker because of the MSR diffuser system that's used. Anyway, we're just coming up to 2 minutes now, as you can see, and the Minimo is boiling. Okay, so the Minimo boils at 204, the fastest of the three. Just turn that one off. Okay, so that one's off. Now we're going to measure the amount of gas used as well in a second, because it's not just the speed, it's the efficiency of the burner. So we're just over 2 minutes for the Minimo. Looks like the wind burner is next. Yeah, that's 230, that's boiling now. Okay, and the Primus is just coming up to boil, I'd say. Make sure they're all open fully. Yeah, it was. Okay, so yeah, the Primus just coming up to boil now in just short of 3 minutes. Okay, so you know, although the Minimo, well, the Primus took 50% longer than the Minimo, 2 minutes to 3 minutes. 3 minutes is hardly a long time to wait for some boiling water. Okay, I'm just going to do some gas measurements now and see compare the efficiency of the burners. Gas consumption wise, the Minimo and the Lite Plus used 5 grams, while the wind burner used 7. So in this test, the Minimo boiled the fastest and was equally efficient as any other stove. So on an outright performance, then the Minimo is the winner. The Lite Plus takes longer but uses the same amount of gas to heat the same amount of water. So unless that last minute is important to you, an equally good stove. The wind burner was in the middle for burn time, but used the most gas. 5 to 7 grams. Actually, though 2 grams is not a lot, it is a considerable percentage less efficient. So I just wanted to have a look at a few of the other features of the stove that might help you pick what you're after. Each of the stoves is slightly different. They're all trying to be slightly different things. The Minimo has the largest pot. Jetboil have other stoves much more like the Lite Plus and the wind burner. They've got the Jetboil Zip and the Flash. So those are classically much like these pot. They have longer, thinner pots, designed just for boiling water. So the Minimo has a different shaped pot, so it has a larger capacity pot, and it can be used for a bit more than boiling just water. There's enough space in there to do some pasta in there, rather than these are designed really for making tea or boiling and to freeze dry food bags. So there is a bit of space in here. You can actually do the cooking. A nice touch that the lid also contains the gas canister support if you need that for using it on not very even ground, so that's in there. The Minimo also has a couple of nice features. So it has plastic coated handles, which are actually has rigid metal handles rather than the fabric ones on all the other systems. So it is a bit easier to use and to deal with, easier to pick up. Because the burner unit obviously moves around a lot more inside the larger cup, it comes with like a soft bag for the burner unit to try and protect the inside of the cup from damage. And also because it's larger size, the plastic that protects the heat efficiency fins on the bottom of the cup also makes quite a nice bowl. It's actually, you know, it's just in general a bit larger. So it's not trying to be lighter, not trying to be the lightest, most efficient system in terms of weight, but it is, performance is very good, and it's also a better system for two people, rather 2 or 3 people, I guess, rather than 1. The MSR Windburner is following along with MSR's theory about the reactor stove. What they're saying is that it doesn't have the fastest boil times in an environment like I'm doing here with no wind, but due to, let me just unclip it, due to the fact that, you know, the other systems, let me just undo the Jetboil one as well. You know, the Jetboil has a classic, all the heat comes from the middle of the burner unit, and the MSR system has this diffuser. So when you light it, which you have to do with a lighter because of the way the gas comes out, okay, you just don't get a flame, you know, a flame up the middle like you do with a classic cooker. What happens here is the whole top of the unit has a small flame over the top of the whole thing, so it really heats the whole surface of the bottom of the pan much more evenly than the other cookers, which drive a jet into the middle of them. Okay, so that is the, you know, the system that MSR use, and they claim, and well, actually we have verified to some extent in our testing, is that when you use them outside in blustery conditions, they still seem to achieve the same burn times they do when they're inside, whereas some of the classic stoves, they do slow down a bit more outside, but it's very difficult to recreate those conditions. So the MSR stove does aim to be, you know, the real tough conditions stove. That's what they're pitching theirs at. A couple of nice features of the MSR stove. I mean, it has a pretty generous cup, although it's not as wide as the Minimo, because the radius at the bottom isn't as big. It is a very nice deep cup at the bottom, so that does work as a second bowl or cup, and it's got some graduations on the side there, so that's pretty good. The lid on the MSR one clips on, so although it might be a little bit tricky to put on once the when you've lit the stove, you can pour this one-handed without worrying about the stove coming out, the lid coming off, which you can't do with the Primus. You do actually have to hold the Primus lid on, but the Minimo one, that is quite a nice soft silicone lid, and that does clip on. That's probably the nicest of the 3 actually, because it's a silicone, so it pushes on quite easily, but it stays on. The MSR one is a harder plastic, so it doesn't push on as well, although once it is on, it stays on. Both the Minimo and the MSR one have a hole in the top for a coffee plunger, if that's what you're after. I would say that the MSR sleeve is not quite thick enough. This is much hotter to touch than this one or this one. I think the Primus one is probably the coolest. The MSR one feels actually so thin that it's slightly uncomfortable to pick it up with your hand, whereas that's not the case with the other 2. So the cozy on this one, you know, isn't as good, I don't think. One thing that the Windburner does really well is the way it locks onto the pot, onto the stove. Basically, the Windburner can lock on at every single one of these holes. They're all exactly the same in terms of bayonet fitting. So no matter where you put it onto the cup, you only have to turn it a tiny bit and then it locks into position. Right, okay, the MSR, the Jetboil one, you know, it only locks on in one of 3 positions, and actually it's quite awkward. I think Jetboil, I've always found them a bit awkward to lock on. I do really like the locking on system of the Primus. It also only locks on in 3 positions, but it's kind of reversed, rather than the pot going down inside a ring that's on top of the burner and locking on, the burner head has a wire triangle on it, and that goes up inside the cup. So although it only goes on in one of 3 positions, once it's on, it goes on very easily, and I think it is the most stable once it's on. So I mean, it's a small difference, but it does. You do notice it, that when it locks on the most positively, and I think it is the most stable once it's on there. The Primus Lite Plus system does not come with a cover that locks onto the bottom of the cup when not in use. These protect the fins and also double as a cup. So what Primus have done is that they've made the lid of the system deeper, and you use that as your cup. Doesn't really seem to make much difference in my opinion. You've only got 1 plastic thing rather than 2, although I'm not too keen on the fact that you have to use 2 hands to pour the Primus, otherwise you're a bit worried about the lid coming off while you're pouring. So there you have it, the Jetboil Minimo, the MSR Windburner and the Primus Lite Plus. All great fuel efficient stoves, all slightly different, so whichever one suits you best.